Baseball live chat. Paul Mancano joined by Andy Kostka in his hotel room in Nashville, Tennessee. Andy, thanks so much for hopping on from the winter meetings.
Of course, Paul. Anything for you.
Wow. It has been, you had an excursion across Europe. It has been so long since I have seen your face on this chat, but we're going to be talking about all things Orioles as they navigate their way through the what is the hotel called? The Grand Opry?
The Gaylord Opryland Resort and Convention Center, which is a maze. I have a map in my back pocket because of how much of a maze it is.
You would think they'd want to make it easier to navigate around when they're trying to conduct meetings and have in-person discussions. But I guess it's better than Vegas when they couldn't get cell service for most of the winter.
Yeah, that's a good point. It was funny when Matt Blood walked up to me yesterday, the farm director for the Orioles, and was like, "Andy, do you know where this room is?" And I was like, "Your guess is as good as mine. Good luck finding whatever meeting you're going to."
Yeah,
I have no clue.
So we are live on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, and we're going to be taking comments and questions as we go along. So keep that chat going. But first, Andy, you were one of the media members gathered in Mike Elias's hotel room last night discussing the market for pitching primarily. What did Mike Elias have to say about what the Orioles are looking for and how they're going about finding some starting pitching and some relievers this winter?
Yeah, well, they're actively looking for both relievers and starters. Mike Elias said they would like one rotation upgrade, which you can infer that being, kind of a front end starter type to fit in somewhere around, Kyle Bradish probably is one or two. Then you add in a rotation guy that could be, in that same mix, one or two in the rotation. Probably, I imagine trade would be the way they go. I know, a source close to it, close to the discussions, said, they're active in the trade market, but so is every team. That is kind of the way, teams do due diligence. They look at not just the main position of need, which is starting pitcher or, a back end reliever, but they also, monitor the market in case something else pops up. So basically right now, the Orioles, what they will be doing is combing the league, talking to other teams, finding what do those teams need? What do we have? What is expendable on our roster? Probably, they have a glut of prospects. They could, and Elias said as much, they could theoretically outbid any team, was his direct quote. Will they do that? It's a big, it's a balance, because you have to imagine that, at a certain point, if you're outbidding a team, it might not be the best, most prudent deal for your team. If you give too much, and probably, Jackson Holiday, for instance, would probably be too much of a price. So that's what's going on. A lot of trade discussions, definitely talking to free agents as well. It's an information gathering type of session that Mike Elias likes to use the winter meetings as, and we'll see if a move happens. But definitely no sense of urgency in a way, Mike Elias said, and I'm sure there will be a sense of urgency as soon as names start going off the board, be it, big trades, a Dylan Cease, when Otani goes off the board, obviously he's not pitching this year, but a lot of more movement will happen once the big dominoes fall, I imagine.
Yeah, Jordan Montgomery,
yeah,
Blake Snell, some of those other free agents signed. But I want to go back to what you had to say and what Elias had to say about trade possibilities, because he did push back on the notion that the Orioles have to make a move, and especially have to trade away some of their prospects. You do look at where this big league roster is, and you look at where the prospects are situated, and there are a ton in AAA Norfolk. You have Connor Norby, Kobe Mayo, Joey Ortiz down in AAA Norfolk. You have Jordan Westberg, maybe Jackson Holiday coming up to the big leagues next year, plus Gunnar Henderson and Ramon Arias and Jorge Mateo. There is just a glut of infielders in particular. But Elias doesn't want to feel like he has to make a move just because he has all these players. He wants to keep as many of them as possible. But at the same time, don't you think he's going to run out of room for some of these guys? And don't you think a roster crunch could be coming sooner rather than later if he goes into spring training in Sarasota in February with the glut of prospects that they already have?
Yeah, absolutely. And Mike Elias said, in his opinion, there is no such thing as too many prospects. He's not of the mind that he has to make a trade, kind of as you said, that, he doesn't need to. But you have to imagine at the same time that you physically cannot have playing time for every single prospect. It's not possible.
No.
So, especially when you have an outfield that consists right now, on this very day, assuming there's not a trade to move one of the established outfielders, but you have Cedric Mullins, Santander, and Austin Hayes. That's a really good outfield you have. Plus, you have Colton Cowser, Heston Kjerstad, Kyle Stowers. Kobe Mayo could play a little corner outfield. I know he's working on it this offseason. Connor Norby could probably play some corner outfield too. I think he did a little bit in AAA last year, maybe 26 times if I recall. That's a lot of prospects, and they all have phenomenal bats, and you have to find a way to get them in the lineup. And at the end of the day, the reason you have these prospects is, one is so that they play for your team and they help your team win. But if you have a hole, and they do, the starting rotation and without Felix Bautista for 2024, you have to imagine that a closing pitcher is on the. And Mike Elias said as much, that they'd like a back end reliever as well. Maybe in the trade market. You use prospects to fill a hole on your team so you can win now. And you absolutely understand where he's coming from, that you don't want to just give away a prospect when maybe it's a lopsided deal in the opposing team's favor. They might be getting more out of a prospect than you're getting with an established player. But if you're not willing to trade these guys, you're gonna run out of spots. So I imagine you use this prospect capital to add a starting pitcher and a reliever. Maybe they dip into the free agent market for one of those, but I do imagine a trade will happen at some point this winter.
Yeah. Now getting some comments as we are live on YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. Josh asking, is there any sense of who the Orioles might be willing to give up? I think we can both say for certainty that Jackson Holliday is off the table for anybody in all of baseball, save maybe Mike Trout, but maybe even then that might be a pushing things. But other than that, do you have an idea of, who might be off the table, so to speak, in these discussions?
I think almost everybody is on the table besides Jackson Holliday. I would be really interested, and this is conjecture on my part, so I don't mean to come off as having sourcing on this, but there is an interesting idea of Samuel Basallo has been highly touted, and for good reason. Terrific minor league career thus far. Young player, can play first base, catcher, DH. I'd be interested to see if they sell high, on that. They could technically flip a prospect that is really shot up prospect rankings. You have Adley Rutschman as your everyday catcher. Basallo obviously can play other positions as well, and you always need a backup catcher. They have James McCann right now, but eventually, you will need a backup catcher. I'd be interested to see, though, if you use a prospect as highly as him. I think he's number 2 on the Baseball America list. And Kobe Mayo is an interesting name too. Corner infield, probably could play some right field if you need him to. Some DH obviously. Great bat from him. He's still a really young guy. Teams are gonna like what they see in Kobe Mayo. That'd be a big ask. But I do think he would probably be as well if the return is big enough.
Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned Samuel Basallo because, like you said, he's been a fast riser, and the 2023 season was great to him. He rose all the way up to Double-A. They have McCann under contract for one more year, so it would seemed to be a natural fit for Basayo to eventually take over the backup catcher job in 2025. But that might be a low ceiling for him. I mean, he might be viewed as an everyday catcher by big league clubs around baseball. And it also brings to mind the question of extensions. Will the Orioles try to extend Adley Rutschman or Gunnar Henderson? Because if they don't, and Samuel Basayo is next in line, people could be looking down the pipeline and saying, maybe they are preparing for the eventual departure of Adley Rutschman and are grooming Samuel Basayo, one of the best prospects in baseball, to eventually take over for Adley. Some members of the media yesterday asked Mike Elias about extensions, particularly for those two. You did. There we go. Particularly for Rutschman and Henderson. What did Elias have to say, and how did you read his answer to that question?
Well, I tried to ask him. Let me pull up his direct quote
Sure.
so I don't.
I would say it was kindly described as word salad is how I would describe his answer there.
Yeah, I think that I asked him, not specifically. We have asked many times about Henderson and Rutschman specifically. So I asked it in a way of what his philosophy is on extending young players, beyond what they, normally would make. I pointed to the Brewers, what they just did with Jackson Churio, the Atlanta Braves, what they've done, Julio Rodriguez. You have these young stars, and in Jackson's case, for the Brewers, hasn't played an inning of Major League Baseball yet, but has now a large extension. Mike, part of what he said is, this is something we quietly work on in the background, and I hope if we find good deals, we certainly have good players. I hope if we find the right deals, which is not easy to do, then we'll be able to add some of those to the list from the Orioles. So there is, he's hedging a lot there. There's two ifs. There's a which is hard to do in there, which I don't blame him at all. I mean, it's you don't want to, put an assurance out there on something you might not do. And there's also the fact here is that if you look at Jackson Churio's contract, I think it's about $10 million a year. It works out to. Paul, you can fact check me on that, but you're not going to re-sign Henderson and Adley to $10 million a year. They're worth a lot more. So it's definitely a huge, it's a huge commitment compared to, a 19-year-old that hasn't played an inning of Major League Baseball yet. It would be closer probably to not exactly what Julio Rodriguez got, but in that realm of like a huge extension. You have to also imagine that Gunnar Henderson is a Scott Boras client, and just purely history is on the side to not extending before they hit the free agent market. Yeah, and that's the players. It's good for the players. At the end of the day, they can test the open market and see exactly what they're worth on the open market. So I definitely don't want to come off as like begrudging a player for doing that. It's something that I think it would really signal a long-term investment in this crop of prospects if the Orioles decided to say, sign Adley to a long-term extension. Also, not something that Mike Elias is really going to discuss openly, as he has not in the past, and also a difficult contract because they haven't really shown since Chris Davis of giving a contract of anything in that hemisphere of a long-term extension. So it probably is not going to happen this offseason, but we'll see.
They have not handed out a guaranteed multi-year deal since Andrew Kashner, and that was under the previous regime. That was Dan Duquette that made that signing. So we have yet to see that kind of signing, and we certainly have not seen extensions being handed out for any players in-house under this regime. And you could make a case that maybe Elias may have missed his window. You see what the Brewers did trying to get ahead of Jackson Churio, and there's some risk in that because he has not played a single game in Major League Baseball, but Adley Rutschman and Gunnar Henderson have, and they've both established themselves as stars. Adley Rutschman was an all-star this past year. He was a finalist for Rookie of the Year. Gunnar Henderson just won Rookie of the Year. He's probably going to be an all-star at some point in the next few years. It's difficult now to go back to those guys and say, hey, do you want to sign a below market deal that is going to keep you in Baltimore for a few extra years, when every day that they get closer to free agency, they are upping their value. So those two guys in particular are likely to be waiting this process out for as long as possible. And it would be on the Orioles, and the ball would be in their court to make an offer that would have to probably blow away anything that they might receive in free agency in, 4 or 5 years.
Yeah. And I appreciate the comment. Yeah. 8 for 82 for Jackson Chirios. So, about 10 million a year before the options come into his contract. I think he has two additional team options on that for a little bit extra money. But yeah, it's a difficult, now that the cat's out of the bag. We know how good Gunnar Henderson and Adley Rutschman are at the major league level. Very difficult to sign them to a deal that is team friendly at this point, because they're playing well enough to deserve an opportunity to hit the open market.
Yeah. Let's talk about some free agents who could be out there and could make sense for the Orioles. There are some starting pitchers that may be in their price range. It's difficult to say because we don't know exactly what the finances are and what Elias is allowed to spend this winter. But Eduardo Rodriguez is reported to be in Nashville, and he and his agents are meeting with teams. Now, he did decline a 3-year, $49 million option to stay in Detroit. So you'd think that he's looking for a deal that is either longer in terms of years or more expensive, or perhaps both. Haven't seen the Orioles hand out anything like that under Mike Elias, but Eduardo Rodriguez would seemingly fit this rotation very well. Lefty, has a good track record, still not particularly old. But the question is, would the Orioles be willing to hand out a contract like that? And considering he's going to be a little bit cheaper than Jordan Montgomery, he might fit in their price range. What do you think about the potential fit for Eduardo Rodriguez?
I love the fit. He, was a guy that the Orioles were most likely interested in at the trade deadline, in addition to Dylan Cease. Obviously, as Mike Elias described back then, they took big swings at the trade deadline, didn't connect just because of differences in their evaluation of prospects, what they were willing to trade especially for a rental like Eduardo Rodriguez. You had the option, but he was always probably going to decline that. I do see him as a pretty ideal fit. Talked to a source close that said his market is very strong. So not sure the teams he is interested in. But I would imagine the Orioles are somewhere in that realm of interest, and definitely, the left-hand aspect. You have John Means coming back, so you automatically have another left-hander in the rotation. But having all righties in your rotation is not the biggest. It's not the end of the world or anything. But last year, that was the case, and it would be nice to have a little bit more mix and match. To be able to have another lefty, another southpaw that just messes with if you're in a playoff series, you don't get a team into, you don't get the team into a rhythm on the other side of the ball. So I would imagine Eduardo Rodriguez is in that realm of guys they're looking at. Same with Jordan Montgomery. But yeah, Rodriguez might be a little bit cheaper than Montgomery just because of what Montgomery did in the postseason. That is, at the team that wants to compete in the postseason, they can look at that and say, okay, there's a proven track record there. Rodriguez, Detroit did not compete in the postseason, hasn't in a couple of years, maybe even longer than that. So it's not, he doesn't have that pedigree or maybe the, what's the word? The history behind him of postseason success that a Montgomery would have, and probably would drive up the price.
Yeah. Now we got a comment on YouTube as we are live. Keep those comments going and those questions going about Naoki Uesawa, which I do need to get clarification on the pronunciation. I apologize if I butchered it, but he was somebody that the Orioles were linked to in a report, and we haven't heard anything since. But we did hear that they could be having an offer on the table for the Japanese righty who was posted recently, has good numbers in the Japanese baseball league. ERA just under 3 this past year in 24 games and 170 innings, 6.6 Ks per 9. So he's somebody who might interest them. They have not signed a player from overseas in a while, from Japan in particular. But have you heard anything, any updates there? And what would you think of an addition like Uwasawa?
I've not heard a thing. No updates there. Not a peep. What I do know about him is he has a great pitch mix. I think he has 7 pitches. Not all of those will be working on a single day, but it gives him a lot of flexibility to find what is working. He's been a steady pitcher over there in Japan. The thing is I don't think he signs as a front end starter. So I would be maybe pitching depth is always important. So I wouldn't be shocked, if Baltimore adds more pitching depth. But he doesn't fit the bill as a top end starter because he's a guy that is coming in and is going to have to adapt to a new country, a new league. The competition is a little bit higher than Japan, and Japan's a very competitive league as well. But Major League Baseball is the best in the world, so it would be a little bit of a risk. But it could be a low, if you're willing to hand out a 1 year $3 million, that's just a guess on what a price range. It could be higher, but that's a fairly reasonable deal for a guy that has shown that he can pitch a lot of innings in the past. And but I haven't heard a thing. So we're trusting that he's on the radar. Definitely trust the Japanese report. But I don't know anything.
Yeah, no, that's fair. We'll find out more probably in the coming weeks. Let's talk about relievers because Mike Elias has indicated and said that he wants to add to that bullpen. Makes a lot of sense. Felix Bautista is going to be out for the entire year. Yennier Cano looked like he was showing some signs of fatigue maybe as the season went along. And we saw in the postseason, the bullpen was stretched a little bit too thin. And we saw guys like Jack Webb having to step up and pitch critical innings, and that didn't work out in the Orioles' favor. Or Jacob Webb, I should say. That did not work out in the Orioles' favor. So they have options in terms of free agents. We know that there are guys like, Robert Stevenson, Hector Neris is out there, Josh Hader on the upper end of closers. They could also look at trades. Emmanuel Clase of Cleveland has had his name floated out there. Do you think the Orioles are more likely to go for a free agent or for a trade as they look to add to this bullpen? And should they be looking for a bona fide closer, or should they just add to their bullpen depth?
I think Mike Elias would love to add a closer. That's way easier said than done because if you have closing experience, naturally your price tag is going to go way high compared to other relievers. Josh Hader would be a very impressive signing. Somebody that is really a top, one of the best closers in the league, has been for a number of years, a very good pitcher. But the trade market again has some interesting names there, and I think just the fact that Baltimore has the prospects to move, it would be a more feasible area to go. But don't forget, like Jordan Hicks as well is I believe on the free agent market, and he would be another name. I think John Heyman might have linked him to the Orioles. I forget which. I think it might have been John Heyman said the Orioles had some interest in him. So he's another name. You figure Josh Hader, Jordan Hicks. I think I even saw Aroldis Chapman linked to Baltimore, which would be he can be a little bit of a volatile reliever where when he's on, he's on. When he's off, he's off. And we saw that with Shintaro Fujinami, where it could be really, really good and also very inaccurate. So not sure that's exactly the route they would like to go. But there's a lot of – they definitely want to add relievers. They probably will add relief depth. But, Mike Elias did say yesterday that getting somebody with closing experience would be a cherry on top. It's not an easy thing to do. So not a guarantee by any means, but definitely on the radar and definitely on the wish list.
Yeah. Now, Elias said he doesn't feel any pressure to get a deal done during these winter meetings. He said that last year as well. The Orioles last year announced that they were signing Kyle Gibson to a 1-year contract on the first day of winter meetings. Haven't seen any big announcements like that yet so far, but you hinted at earlier in this chat, and please keep your comments going as we are live on Facebook and YouTube and Twitter, that this could be a slow-moving market until the big names start coming off the board, until Shohei Otani signs his record-breaking contract with whomever, until Jordan Montgomery and Blake Snell and Josh Hader sign their contracts and Cody Bellinger. But speaking of Shohei Otani, he was linked to, there was a report that he has met with brass from the Toronto Blue Jays in Florida. I know you were going to see Blue Jays manager John Schneider talk later. That would be a major upgrade and addition, obviously, for another team in the AL East. And that would make things harder, tougher sledding for the Orioles for years to come. But it's, to me, I can't see much sense in Otani signing a contract before he gets to do his due diligence and meet with every team and, make up his mind that way. But if Shohei does decide to go to Toronto, boy, would that be a big blow to the Orioles' AL East chances over essentially the lifetime of his contract.
Yeah, I think anytime you have to face Shohei Otani, even when he's not pitching, if he's hitting only next year, and you have to do it more frequently than 3 times a year, like you normally do against the Angels, or I guess 6 times a year, excuse me, you normally would against the Angels. That's an imposing addition, but there's no guarantees. I know nothing about the Otani market because it is incredibly hush. They've expressed, he and his agent they've expressed, wanting to keep things tight-lipped. I believe Jeff Passan reported a week or two ago that actually, if there's leaks, that hurts the team. That was thought to have been leaking discussions to the media. So we'll see exactly what happens. But Ken Rosenthal reported that he was down. Otani was down in Dunedin, Florida, searching for maybe this is the fit. He was touring the spring training facility that I think is fairly new. It's a fairly impressive facility. 2021 it opened. I went there with the Orioles when they played in Dunedin last year, and it was a very impressive facility. But we don't know, and there's a lot of teams on the market that are going to want a player that commands the attention that Otani brings. There's a lot of, that's a huge investment, not only for what your team brings, but think of the tourism that drives. There's the jersey sales that drives. It's having a player of that caliber is definitely impressive. It is interesting, though, the American League East, Baltimore won it for the first time since 2014. But this is a division that is never going to be easy. And this kind of just exemplifies that every single year, every single team in the AL East is going to be rebuilding, not rebuilding, like retooling, and making sure that they're even better than they were last year. This is just an example. Toronto, if they add, Otani, it could be, quite an impressive addition.
Yeah, we are live on YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. Another reminder to keep your comments coming. Jonathan asking, are Kjerstad and Mayo untouchable to trade this offseason? You said earlier you don't think really anybody, with the exception of Jackson Holliday, is untouchable.
Correct, yeah. I believe Jackson would be the untouchable piece, and then everybody is available for the right price. Yeah. So we'll see what that price is. That's the big problem ahead for Elias, which is how do you balance, what the right price is? Because these players, you mentioned Mayo and Kjerstad, they're projected to have phenomenal careers. So do you want to watch them have phenomenal careers elsewhere for a pitcher that you might only have for 1 year? Debatable. Does that pitcher help you win a World Series? Probably worth it. So that's going to be the analysis that Mike Elias and his team have to do this week and throughout the winter.
Yeah, it's just everybody's available with the exception of Holiday. It's just the bar is a lot higher for somebody of Kerstad or Cowser or Westberg's caliber. Another question coming about Josh Hader. Josh Hader's probably the top reliever on the market, I think you could say. Left-hander, closing experience, aside from a down 2022, he's had an elite career over, in Milwaukee and then San Diego. They probably won't need somebody of that caliber to take the spot of Felix Bautista for next year. But it would certainly be nice to add a lefty of his caliber to that bullpen. Do you think that the Orioles will check in on Josh Hader, or do you think that they'll just kind of move on to the second tier of relievers?
Oh, I'm sure they'll check in. I'm sure they checked in on just about every reliever in the market. That's a major focus for Baltimore. The Orioles do their due diligence, of course, is the word I'll say again, but they check in with everybody. So it's perhaps easy to say they have interest in almost everybody because they look and then they see, and if the initial ask is way out of their price range, they won't pursue it. So we'll see. Josh Hader would be the top free agent reliever probably on the market, I'd imagine, and the fact that he has closing experience would be a major help for this team. But they could probably, honestly, the Orioles, I wouldn't be surprised if they went out in the middle market and got 2, 3, 4 relievers and say, hey, let's find out who's our guys in spring training. And there's so many injuries happen to relievers. It happens all the time. It's a tough position to play. So you're going to need depth, and they probably will need to rely on the random waiver claims. Jacob Webb helped in the middle of the season when they claimed him. Don't forget Danny Coulomb, was a trade pickup right at the end of spring training and was one of the best lefties out of the bullpen for Baltimore this year. So there will be many additions probably. Some of them may never pitch for the Orioles. It's just kind of the way it goes. But I wouldn't be shocked if the route they do go is adding a couple arms to just help the depth aspect. And you'll see exactly how it all plays out. But it's tough to add just one with the history of not necessarily be willingness to pay a lot on the free agent market, but now this is a team that's in a different position than they were when Elias joined. So maybe they will open the pocketbook a little bit.
Yeah, and we saw them take that kind of approach to backup first baseman.
Exactly.
Where they took as many bites of the apple as possible. They didn't go out and spend all of their money on Joey Gallo or Eric Hosmer. They said, let's make waiver claims. Let's grab Lewin Diaz. Let's grab Ryan O'Hearn. And they grabbed as many of those guys as possible. And O'Hearn ended up winning the battle out of, essentially not even in spring training. He didn't win an opening day roster spot, but he won it as the season went along, and it worked out. So maybe they do that
phenomenal.
that same approach.
And they do look likely to look at right-handed hitting outfielders. You lose Aaron Hicks, and Aaron Hicks had a lot of playing time. He's a free agent. He could technically come back. But he was a switch hitter that gave them a lot of flexibility. They have a lot of left-handed hitting guys coming up, so maybe maybe they do look at a right-handed hitting outfielder. That's a possibility. They have Ryan McKenna still on the roster, tentative contract, so that's another option for a fourth outfielder if they figure he could help the most in a defensive replacement / right-handed hitting situation.
Some right-handed hitting outfielders who are currently free agents and might be in their price range. Adam Duvall is out there. He's 35, put up 1.5 WAR according to Baseball Reference last year. We've seen, Randall Grichuk is out there, 1.3 WAR last year, right-handed hitting with Colorado and the Angels. Several players that might fit that bill. Tommy Pham, who had a good postseason run with Arizona last year, 36 years old, but maybe you could get him for a year or two. So another question on YouTube, and keep those questions and those comments going about the Orioles' left-handed pitchers in their farm system that we could see come up through their system. They are not flush with pitching prospects. They have a few guys who, could crack their big leagues rotation or their bullpen in a year or two. DL Hall, I think there's still the possibility that he could be a starter for this team, whether it's 2024 or beyond. Beyond that, Cade Povich is really the top left-handed pitcher that they have in their system, and he got all the way up to AAA last year. He's 23 years old. I don't know if he is a candidate to seriously crack the rotation out of camp because they already have John Means. They already have enough experienced starters. And if they add to that group, during this offseason, I think it's even less likely that he breaks camp with the team. But maybe he is a player that they could use, if there's an injury mid-season or 2025 or beyond. They don't have any sure things right now. In terms of starting pitchers in the minors. Grayson Rodriguez was the surest thing that they had in terms of a pitching prospect. And, we'll see how he does this coming year, still has that ace potential. But beyond that, it's a lot of if maybes and, guys who are probably middle of the rotation to the back end of the rotation guys.
Yeah, I will just mention really quickly, what Mike Elias was asked yesterday about DL Hall and Tyler Wells and what that might look like, relief versus starting. And Mike said that probably not both of them in the rotation. One of them could be in the rotation while the other is in the bullpen. But also, both could be in the bullpen. And it definitely, Tyler Wells was phenomenal the first half of 2023, and that cannot be forgotten. So I'd imagine maybe he would have the front line to kind of make that fourth or fifth starter position in the rotation, just based on his that was a quality 2023 before he had some fatigue issues second half and then came back as a bullpen piece and was great out of the bullpen too. But DL Hall, I kind of think as a bullpen guy, he definitely is going to ramp up this offseason as a starter because it's a little easier to switch from deload rather than go from a relief training regimen to trying to be a starter. So he's going to ramp up as a starter and see what happens in the spring. But I kind of imagine him as a reliever. I think he could be a real difference maker as a lefty out of the bullpen. And Tyler Wells might be a reliever too, especially if they add a top end guy. You figure you have a Dean Kramer, Kyle Bradish, Grayson Rodriguez, John Means, and then in addition to the rotation. Of course, Tyler Wells could beat out Dean Kramer, and maybe Dean Kramer is a long guy. A lot of different ways it can go. Unfortunately, there could be an injury, and then DL Hall and Tyler Wells are both in the rotation. You don't know.
Yeah, there's a ton of question marks right now, and you have a lot of questions for Mike Elias and for Brandon Hyde. Hyde is speaking in just a few minutes, so I want to let you go, Andy. You have to run down and find your way through this maze of a hotel that you are stuck in Nashville. But thank you so much for taking your time and answering some commenters' questions and hopping on live here on the Banner Baseball live chat. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Hope people learned at least a tiny bit. had fun doing it.
Yeah. And you can follow us both at Paul Mancano for me, at AF Kostka for Andy, and of course the Baltimore Banner. $1 for 6 months has you covered completely, all of your bases covered from the winter meetings as Andy and Danielle Allentuck are down there having you covered from Nashville. For Andy Kostka, I'm Paul Mancano. Thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll see you in a week's time, 1 p.m. every Tuesday. Tune in to the Banner Baseball Live.